So let's take you way back.
Yes.
Kind of we all, or many of us are taught to swim at a very young age. Yet for me personally, I never transformed that swimming into decided to swim in the open water for a very long way.
Yeah.
How did it start?
So my first swim was when I was 17 years old. I didn't really start as a swimmer. I started out as a long distance runner, but my first swim was when I was 17 years old. I did my high school in Cape Town, and from my classroom I could see Robben Island. And one of my friends had swum to Robben Island, and so I desperately wanted to do it. And anyway, so I went and got swimming lessons. And then
You couldn't swim.
I wasn't a polished swimmer by any stretch of the imagination, right? So anyway, I went and got swimming lessons, and about a month later, I got a boat out to Robben Island, and I started to swim back. Now, just to explain, the water off South Africa is actually really cold, and I was really thin in those days. Anyway, so for the first hour, everything was okay, but by the time I got to the second hour, I was starting to get really cold. After 2.5 hours, I was not only cold, I was absolutely exhausted. And then it was a combination of going into breaststroke and crawl to finally get to the end. And I'll never forget that moment when I finally landed on the beach, because just before I got there, I heard later that the members of the team who were in the boat, they were taking bets about whether I would give up. Anyway, eventually I got there. I remember putting my feet down on the sand, and that sheer joy of making it, because it had been so tough. And on that day, I really fell in love with swimming, and it's been a love which has lasted nearly 40 years now. Yeah.
And did you, in those moments that it went cold and colder at you, did you think you were going to give up? Or was it always, I've got to do it?
I was really determined, because there was somebody in my class who'd said you won't make it. So, typically at that age, you're going out to also try to prove that.
Were they gutted that you made it? Were they
I don't even know. I can remember the person's name, but I can't remember his response.
So would you say that was the toughest swim you've ever done, or has it got tougher since then?
Well, so what happens is, I don't think I've ever done an easy swim, because as your career progresses, you try harder and harder and harder things. I'm probably best known for doing the first swim across the North Pole, which is unimaginably cold. But if I was to think about the toughest swim of my life, it would probably be the swim along the length of the English Channel. So
what year are we talking here?
We're talking about 6 years ago.
Okay.
So just to give you a little bit of background, about 2,000 people have swum across the English Channel. That's 33 kilometers. The length, though, is very, very different. It's not 33, it's 528 kilometers. It took me 49 days. It was hard.
Tell us why it's so hard. Bearing in mind that this is reference against swimming in the in the Arctic Ocean.
It's so hard because mentally you need to get yourself right. Because you're going to be swimming, I swam for 49 days, right? And what's going to happen during the 49, let me just take you a step back. If you want to swim across the English Channel, you sit in Dover and you wait for the perfect day. And when the perfect day goes, off you go. If you're going to swim the length of the English Channel, you can't wait for the perfect day, because you're going to have to swim for 40, 50 days. So you're going to have to swim through storms. Anyway, the way I prepared for this mentally was, on the first day of the swim, I met my crew on the beach, and I said to them, I'm going to make you 3 promises right now. I said, number 1, I'm going to try and leave all my doubt, and all of us must do this. We must leave our doubt here at the beginning, because it's perfectly natural. If you're going to swim for 528 kilometers, you're going to have worries or concerns. If we're going to make this, we need to leave all our doubt here at the beginning. I said, the second promise I'm going to make you is that every single day I will swim 10 kilometers. And then the third promise, if we can't swim on a day because it is so wild out at sea we can't get out, then the following day I will swim 20 kilometers. I then shook their hands, and then I started to swim from Land's End all the way to Dover. And we went through a couple of really big storms. But eventually, after 49 days, we made it. We got to Dover. And in Dover is a small statue of Captain Matthew Webb. And he was the first person to swim across the English Channel, so a width of the English Channel. And underneath the statue is a small quote by him where he says, "Nothing great is easy." And that is just so, so true. Because if you're going to try something which is so tough, then number one, you need to leave your doubt behind. Number two, you need to take action every single day. And number three, if you're going to try something very tough, you're going to have to be prepared to do double shifts.
So let me ask you, you mentioned your team a couple of times there.
Yes.
Is it the same team every time, or is it a different team? And tell us about the reactions if it is a different team each time when you lay out what should we do.
Yeah. It's been a similar team for the past 10 years. Different expeditions require different things. So, for example, this swim here is in Antarctica down a tunnel. Okay, that's a very, very high consequence environment when you're swimming underneath ice. So you need specialist people who really are comfortable in the cold. But if you're going to do, for example, the length of the English Channel, you require a different type of person. Anyway, I always choose them based on a few different things, which at the end, you kind of get the perfect team. The first thing that I'm looking for when I choose my team is I'm looking for people who have an unrelenting pursuit of excellence. That everything they do to the very best of their ability, because it's such a high consequence environment. If you make a small mistake, I could lose my life, or even worse, somebody else in my team could lose their lives. So I'm looking for, an unrelenting pursuit of excellence. The second thing I'm looking for is a specific type of personality. If I take you through a range of personalities, on the most extreme end of society, you have your pessimists, and then you have your cynical people, then you have your realists, optimists, and daydreamers over here. I look for people over here, I look for people who are optimistic realists. It makes such a difference. If you have somebody who's a little bit pessimistic, a little bit cynical, it really pulls you down, and equally you don't have a daydreamer. So I'm looking for people who say, let's roll up our sleeves and let's give this a good go. Last thing I look for is people who care. It's a kind of glue which brings everything together. It builds a trust in a team, that they care about the mission, they care about themselves, and they care about the person next to them. And I've found that if I choose my teams based on those three things, inevitably you get a really world-class team.
So let me ask, obviously you talked about the tunnel there, you talked about the team. What happens when things don't go to plan? What happens when it goes wrong?
So I've been swimming now for 40 years, 3 swims, I failed on 3 swims. One of them we were able to turn around at the last moment. The most important thing is you have a culture of adaptability. Let me just explain that in practice. I went up onto Mount Everest to do a swim, to highlight just what's happening in the Himalayas with the melting glaciers. These glaciers provide water to India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, some of the most important nations on this earth. Anyway, so I went up onto Mount Everest, I dived into this glacial lake, I'm swimming across this glacial lake, and I just couldn't breathe. I was gasping for air, I had no strength in my legs, I was dragging in the water. Actually, at one stage I thought, this is really dangerous. And the leader of the expedition, who used to be a general in the British Army, he literally ran into the water and grabbed me out, and he said, "Lewis, it's all over." He said to me, "If I allow you to carry on with this swim, you could quite easily drown, and you'd just be another person that kills themselves on Mount Everest." He said, "I'm taking you off this mountain right now." And he took me off the mountain, and then he said to me, "If you want to do this, Lewis, you've got to change, and you've got to be adaptable, because if you don't change, you're going to drown." And when somebody frames it like that, you kind of switch on very, very quickly. He said, the most important thing here is lack of oxygen. So instead of swimming as quickly as you can, I need you to swim as slowly as you can. Now, that's the first time in my life that somebody has told me, I need you to swim as slowly as you can. Okay? But he said, don't swim fast, swim slow. Don't swim crawl, because I can't see your face. And you've got your head in the water. I want you to swim breaststroke now. So for the first time in my life, I'm going to have to swim breaststroke. But he said, then you can breathe whenever you need to. And then lastly, he said to me, the aggression which you use to generate the heat, which is the way you swum for many years, you need to put that to one side. And he pointed up to Everest and he said, you cannot bully Mount Everest. Okay? And we went back there. 3 days later, I swam breaststroke really slowly and with humility, and we made it. Just the point being is that when things start going wrong, you need to be able to listen. You need to have a culture of listening in the team, but also you need to have a culture of adaptability.
Have you always been that sort of person who, although doing incredible things, kind of can listen to the people around you, even when kind of you've done incredible things before, and it's like, I know what I'm doing to some extent?
You've got to be able to listen, but you've got to be able to selectively listen. And I'll tell you the reason why, because I don't think I've done a swim in 40 years where most of the people before haven't said to me, Lewis, this is impossible.
So let me bring you on to the kind of, we're now in July, coming up to July 2025, and obviously you're kind of telling us about the recent swim in Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, it was so hard. I mean, it really was. So just to explain the reason for the swim, so this was a swim around Martha's Vineyard, which is an island off Cape Cod. And it's an incredible island, but 50 years ago, this is where the film Jaws was made. Anyway, what's happened to sharks is absolutely devastating. Their numbers have completely crashed now. About 100 million sharks are killed every single year. I mean, it's a number which is so hard to get your mind around. So anyway, I decided to swim around the whole island to talk about how we need to really protect these incredible animals. You can't have a healthy ocean without sharks. Anyway, so the swim was long, it was 12 days. It was really cold, about 8 degrees colder than when you swim across the English Channel. But what makes it really tough is, I'm constantly doing interviews early in the morning in Australia, late in the evening in Canada about sharks. Now you've got to get in the water and you've got to swim. And the human mind isn't good at suddenly turning off the fact that there's sharks, and there are a lot of sharks around Cape Cod. And so for 12 days that was tough.
How do you deal with swimming with sharks?
The sharks were the one thing, but also what was incredible was we had 10 days of storm. Like normally I prepare for a storm, maybe 1 or 2 days, but this ended up, first day was wonderful, last day was wonderful, and 10 days of storm. Purpose will get you in the water, but it won't keep you in the water. And what I mean by that is that, when you're absolutely exhausted, you're frozen cold, there are great white sharks in the water, your purpose will get you in, but it won't keep you in that type of circumstances because it is just so tough when you've done it day after day after day. And practically what I did was, it was day 8 of the expedition, and it only covered half of the swim. And I'm just about to get in the water, and it's dawn, and I'm lowering myself into the water, and you've got great white sharks, and it's freezing cold. And I looked at the paddler next to me, who had been paddling with me for 8 days, and just waves were crashing over him. And very sadly, his father had died a week beforehand after a long illness. And I looked to him, and the previous day, all we had covered was 1 kilometer in the right direction. And I looked at him and I said to him, Nick, we're going to swim for Colin today. Colin was his father. And that day we ground out 16 kilometers. Wow. And the point I'm trying to make is that when things get really tough, you have to find the one reason, just that one reason to keep on going. And on different days it'll be different things. We didn't grind out the 16 kilometers because we were strong. On the contrary, we weren't. We ground it out because there was a deep personal reason between the two of us to keep on going for one more day. And that broke the back of the swim.
I love that. Let me just ask one more question before we open it up. you mentioned a couple of kind of swims you've done and the reason behind that.
Yeah.
When you're planning, does it start with the purpose, or does it start with the kind of the swim?
If I'm honest, it probably starts with the swim. I've got a big atlas at home, and I'm constantly looking at places where perhaps I could swim, and then I try and link it with a message about the environment. That's the way it kind of works. But the most important thing is that it's not an arbitrary place.
Right.
It has to be so easy for the media to understand it. And the message has got to be so simple. So here's a person swimming around Martha's Vineyard. This is where Jaws was filmed. He's trying to rewrite the narrative about sharks, that they're not villains, but they're actually really important to protect our oceans. Or here's a person swimming across the North Pole, across an open patch of sea. You shouldn't be able to swim across it. You're doing it to highlight just how the Arctic is melting. So I'm linking myself with a place and a very simple message, and it has to be something which a school kid can understand.
And do you feel, kind of apologies to everyone, do you feel you've always got it right, or is it time?
Oh no, I've got it wrong sometimes.
And is that just because you overreached the message, or?
The message has to be at the right moment, at the right time, and you're always competing against other things. So just before I was about to start this swim, you know, everything is happening in Gaza, Ukraine, Russia. There's so much happening. And we ran the risk of, you know, if things had got even hotter in Iran at the time, then our story would have been completely dead. So it is about getting the right timing. The North Pole swim, I was lucky. I was at the right moment in time to be able to try and tell that story. Yeah.
Thank you. Questions, please.
Thank you very much. I was just wondering, in your 40 years, what's like one of the most magical moments that you've had when swimming? I imagine, I don't know, just being there and you see something amazing, or just like the sense of the place.
I swam down the Hudson River, and the Hudson River is truly one of the most amazing places on this planet. So I went high up into the Adirondack Mountains, and the river starts at little rapids and waterfalls, and you've got these beautiful forests around you. I mean, it's so amazing. And you've got bears walking along the edge. And as I was swimming down the river, a huge, great bald eagle came out of the sky and just started following me down the river. And so I flipped onto my back and I just started doing backstroke, and you just got this bald eagle. I mean, they were nearly extinct just a few years ago in upstate New York, and just this bald eagle just following me down the river. And I think that was just, if I could have one more day of swimming in the upper reaches of the Hudson, it would probably be it.
That question was really lovely and positive. Mine's sort of the other side of the coin a little bit, but you talked about swimming in glaciers and the Arctic where you shouldn't be able to. From an environmental perspective, what's the most shocking thing you've seen or a place you've been?
So there are three things which I'm seeing now in the world's oceans. The one is the melting of the ice in the Arctic, and every single year I go there, there's less and less ice. I mean, it's when you go to some of the glaciers high up in the Norwegian Arctic, for example, and only a few years ago they were there, now they've gone. It's extremely concerning. The stability which we've had for the last 12,000 years in terms of our climate, that stability is now ended. Right, so we're now facing a world which is more fires, more wild storms, less and less ice. We're running now into a very, very difficult period. The other big change I'm seeing is less and less wildlife, less and less biodiversity. And then the third thing is plastic pollution. And it's everywhere. And the tragedy is I'm seeing it in places where there haven't even been humans. So I can be high up in the Arctic, in a place called Svalbard. I can be at a beach where really, other than a few scientists perhaps have been there haven't been humans, and there can be plastic pollution all over the beach. And to see wildlife, for example, walruses or polar bears, come out of the water and then climb over that and then lie down on the beach or on the ice, then you realise that our impact is truly global now.
Do you try and remain positive, or does it get you down?
There are times when it gets me down, I'll be honest, but I try to take action every single day. Yeah.
I'd love to ask about the Martha Singer swim and what were, I read your updates and emails, but what were the shark sort of precautions that were in place, for want of a better phrase? And also, as someone who can be swimming in Italy and have invasive thoughts about great white sharks killing me, how on earth did you block out the thoughts when you were kicking your feet in the ocean that a shark was going to get you?
And so kind of, you were very open about the fact that you're not a fan of sharks.
No, I'm a fan of sharks, but I don't necessarily want to be swimming with them.
That's fine.
So just to give you a little bit of background about my relationship with sharks, I've been swimming for nearly 40 years. I've had 3 encounters with sharks over a 40-year period of swimming with sharks. So the chance of an encounter with a shark, and if you think of the millions and millions and millions of people swimming in the world's oceans, the chance of an encounter with a shark is very rare. I've had 2. One was when I was swimming off the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa, and there were 4 of us, and an enormous great white just flew underneath us. And the interesting thing is we all put up our heads at the same time, and all of us said the exact same thing at the same time. I don't have to say what I said, but I'm sure you can all imagine. The second one was I did a swim across the Red Sea, and on 2 occasions I got out because there was an oceanic white which was bearing straight down on me. What is my precaution for swimming with sharks? The most important thing is, I'm not out in the middle of the Martha's Vineyard, far out at sea on my own. So I've got a boat next to me, everyone's switched on, everyone's looking out. And the second thing is I've got a kayaker right next to me. So that's your most important 2 precautions. To have somebody right next to you and a boat right next to you.
Yeah. And the second part of the question, which is kind of for Lucy or for...
Intrusive thoughts.
Kind of intrusive thoughts.
How do you get that out? I think the only way to get that out is repeated exposure. And I really mean that. The only way you're going to be comfortable is by getting into the water on a more regular basis and swimming with other people. So there were a number of days when I swam with someone else, and I always felt that my odds were sort of a little bit better when there's somebody else swimming with me. So if you can swim with somebody else, that's a good starting point. But also having a boat next to you.
And what would the kayaker do? What is there? Is it to pull you out, or?
No. That really wouldn't carry the message well if there'd been an encounter with a shark.
Well, what should tell us before? Like, what's your training in the lead up to?
So most of the training I did in Plymouth.
Okay.
So I live in Plymouth. This is where I grew up until I moved out to South Africa when I was 10. And it's one of the best places to train in the world because it's cold, and in the middle of winter it can be. I hope there's nobody from Plymouth here, but it can be pretty miserable in winter. So getting into the sea every single day and training in those conditions was actually absolutely essential for a swim like that.
What are the sort of the driving factors behind sort of, if you can call it, overfishing of sharks, or sort of the kings of sharks? And secondly, what are the consequences that people are not aware in the long term? I guess if sharks do go extinct.
That's a good question. Yeah. So whenever I speak to the media or give a speech, I'm always looking for 3 numbers. To cut through the noise, you're looking just for real simplicity with all the data. So when I did the swim, I spoke about 3 numbers. The first number I spoke about was 50. So it was the 50th anniversary of Jaws, and Jaws has shaped the narrative about sharks for the past 50 years. They're villains and they're dangerous. That the only good shark is a dead shark. Okay? And that we now need to have a new narrative for a new generation because sharks are essential. The second number I was speaking about was 274,000. That's a number of sharks which are killed on average every single day around the world. I mean, it's just 274,000, and the vast majority of that is coming from commercial fishing, right? So that's coming, and it's mostly for hunting for fins, right? So 274,000. The third number was 100 million. So you take the 274,000, you multiply that over a whole year, it's 100 million. Okay? It is completely unsustainable. It's complete madness. The only solution to this is we've got to stop hunting sharks. We've got to respect them. I mean, sharks have been around since before the dinosaur, right? They've survived 5 mass extinctions, but right now they're right on the edge. Your last question is, what is the consequence of us carrying on like this? Well, I want you to imagine a terrestrial example. Sharks are like lions on the savannah. So if you were to hypothetically take out all the lions out of Africa, then very, very soon the numbers of zebra and wildebeest and impala, they're going to multiply. Okay? They're then going to eat all the grass and all the vegetation, and there'll be nothing for them to eat, and there'll be an ecological collapse. It's the same if you take out all the sharks. Very, very soon you'll just have a watery desert. So sharks are actually essential for a healthy ocean. They keep the ocean in balance. Take them all out, and you'll very, very soon have an ecological collapse. And you cannot have a healthy world without a healthy ocean. So all actually starts with the importance of predators.
Do you think why do you think that the knowledge about our oceans, it seems it's having a bit of a moment? David Attenborough's film's just come out. We've done this big swim to raise awareness for sharks, and it seems like it's behind land awareness. You know, it's behind the sort of Amazon. Why do you think that our awareness of how careful we have to be with our oceans seems to be lagging behind the sort of land awareness? I don't know if that's not very well put.
No, but I think you're 100% you're right. It's because most of our interaction with the oceans is sitting on the beach or looking over a cliff and looking out the oceans on a sunset, and it just looks so gorgeous. You know, put your head in the water. So I've spent 40 years in the world ocean, and I've seen them change. So I think the main reason is because people aren't seeing actually what's happening. The other reason is because we are faced with a multitude of crises at the moment. If you're a head of state, the amount of things you're dealing with is so complex, and so many of them, there are very few leaders who are giving oceans, other than some in the South Pacific, who are giving oceans the attention which they need right now. You know, there's so many other issues that they're also having to deal with, which are serious and really pressing.
And do you feel you're a lone voice in this one?
Sometimes, you know, when you're in the water and it's freezing cold, one can feel one is alone, but I'm not. There are a lot of people working on ocean issues now, but we now need to convert commitments, because there have been a lot of commitments made by world leaders, actually into action and into proper protection. That's the big challenge which we're facing right now.
How long does it take you to prepare for a swim like this, from sort of the idea coming into your head to training to it actually happening? What's the timeline look like?
So it depends on the swim. So for example, the swim which I did across the North Pole, this was 2007. So this was across an open patch of sea at the North Pole. Nobody had ever swum anywhere close to this water temperature before. Right? So just to explain how cold it was, a normal indoor swimming pool is 27 degrees centigrade. Swim across the English Channel in summer, it's about 18. The passengers who perished off the Titanic perished in water of 5. Fresh water freezes at 0. This water is minus 1.7, formidable place when you arrive at the North Pole. I mean, it's a place where you arrive and then you ask yourself, am I up for this? Have I got what it takes to actually get in this water? And the cold, you know, I can say cold, but for most people, you know, swimming in the English Channel is cold. For an experienced swimmer, swimming in 5 degrees is really cold. You know, every degree you go down just ratchets up the pain more and more. And when you go below 0, it's a type of pain which demands an answer. Why are you here right now? And you have to have a really strong purpose, and you also have to have a very, very strong drive to do that. So 2007 was when lots of world leaders were denying what was happening in the Arctic. That, okay, nothing's happening here, the ice gets bigger in winter, it gets smaller in summer, everything's normal. We now know that's obviously not the case. I'd spent 5 summers in the Arctic, and every single summer I'd seen the sea ice getting less and less. I'd witnessed it. I wanted to be there to tell a story about what's happening and the fact that we now need to really take action.
Amazing. Let me ask one last question to leave it. And obviously I'm not going to ask what your next thing is, but where haven't you swum that you'd like to swim?
Oh. Do you know something? That's a question which I actually can't remember anyone ever asking me that.
Really?
No. I've never done anything down in the South Pacific though. You know, these beautiful islands of Fiji and Tonga
And it's warmer.
and it's warmer. Yeah, and it's warmer. And they've got incredible wildlife there, you know, big whales and stuff like that. No, it'll be nice. It'll be nice to swim there.
Lewis, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so
Pleasure
much.
speaking.
Thank you.